Well, I know this, and anyone who's ever tried to live knows this. So what you say about somebody else, anybody else, reveals you. What I think of you as being is dictated by my own necessities, my own psychology, my own fears and desires. I'm not describing you when I talk about you. I'm describing me. Now here in this country we've got something called a nigger. It doesn't in such terms, I beg you to remark, exist in any other country in the world. We have invented the nigger. I didn't invent him. White people invented him. I've always known, I had to know by the time I was 17 years old, what you were describing was not me, and what you were afraid of was not me. It had to be something else. You had invented it, so it had to be something you were afraid of, and you invested me with it. Now, if that's so, no matter what you've done to me, I can say to you this, and I mean it. I know you can't do any more, and I've got nothing to lose. And I know, and I've always known, and really always, that's part of the agony. I've always known that I'm not a nigger. But if I am not the nigger, and if it's true that your invention reveals you, then who is the nigger? I'm not the victim here. I know one thing from another. And I know I'm going to born and I'm going to be, I was born, I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to die. And the only way you get through life is to know the worst things about it. I know that a person is more important than anything else. Anything else. I learned this because I've had to learn it. But you still think, I gather, that the nigger is necessary. Well, he's unnecessary to me, so he must be necessary to you. So I give you your problem back. You're the nigger, baby, it isn't me. And in both cities, precisely the same war is being waged. That war may yet spread to engulf the globe. And let's speak plainly. We know, everybody knows, no matter what the professions of my unhappy country may be, that we are not bombing people out of existence in the name of freedom. If it were freedom we were concerned about, then long, long ago we would have done something about Johannesburg, South Africa. If we were concerned with freedom, boys and girls would not, as I stand here, be perishing in the streets of Harlem. We are concerned with power, nothing more than that. And most unluckily for the Western world, it has consolidated its power on the backs of people who are now going to die rather than be used any longer. In short, the economic arrangements of the Western world proved to be too expensive for most of the world. And the Western world will change these arrangements. All these arrangements will be changed for them.
We're talking about human beings who choose, who have the courage to aspire to integrity. And we're living in a moment in which integrity had so thoroughly declined and decayed that it looked as if the very raw stuff that's necessary for social motion and social momentum and social movement was gone, because it doesn't make any difference how correct your analysis is or how sophisticated your view of the world is. If you lack integrity, the movement itself still is sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. It's empty. And we have generated a whole culture, market-driven, obsessed with titillation and stimulation, and puts a premium on smartness and dollars. Smartness and dollars. The heroes are the smart ones. And I say to myself, let the phones be smart. We have to be wise and aspire to integrity. There were a whole lot of smart Nazis. There's a whole lot of smart white supremacists, a whole lot of smart male supremacists, a lot of smart homophobes, a whole lot of smart imperialists. We're looking for something more than smartness. And I'm not promoting stupidity. I'm talking about wisdom, courage. That's what Du Bois had in mind. But we try to tell the young folk, this movement is about integrity first. Don't talk about the movement as a political movement first and foremost. It was a spiritual and moral movement that put integrity at the center. And that's why it affected our souls and touched our humanity. This is not some calculation of interest groups. This is about what it means to be human. Oh, yes. But that second question Du Bois raises, what does honesty do in the face of deception? What does it mean to aspire to be an honest person? And by honesty, I'm talking about the willingness to engage in what James Austin called constancy, to be morally consistent. So when you do have righteous indignation and holy anger and moral outrage, it has as much to do with the ecological catastrophe, which is as evil as the moral catastrophe of white supremacy or male supremacy or wealth inequality, or the economic catastrophe of wealth inequality, 1% of the population owning 42% of the wealth and 22% of America's precious children of all colors living in poverty in the richest nation of the world. That's a moral abomination. That's spiritually obscene. Obscene. But the same moral outrage ought to be connected as well to the homophobia, the anti-Jewish hatred, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim hatred. We have got to be consistent across the board. We can't be honest within our own little silos and then draw walls and think that somehow the moral and spiritual energy does not overflow. What America needs is a coalescing of the moral outrage, ensuring that it's filtered through love and through justice and through truth. But it is militant precisely because it requires those who have been walking around with their backs humped over to straighten up and take a stand. And Brother Martin used to say, what anytime, every day people straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere, because folk can't ride your back unless it's bent. Straighten that out. And what does that mean? It reminds me of the black man who was always in the front of the rally of the great Marcus Garvey, who hated white supremacy. He didn't hate white brothers and sisters, he hated white supremacy. But he always had a black person with a banner that said, the Negro is not afraid. Even if he was shaking, the Negro is not afraid. Almost like Kanye West when he talked about George Bush. George Bush doesn't care about black people. You see, Brother Kanye, not my cousin, but I thought your flow was better than that. No, the Negro was afraid. All of us are afraid about our careers, about being unpopular, not being accepted by the mainstream. Some of us will be engaged, have to wrestle with character assassination. There always must be a few who are willing to die based on the love of the people you're willing to fight for, given what you're up against. Now, martyrdom is not normative for the movement. Everybody can't die, but you got to have a slice of folk who are willing to in their truth-telling. And when you have that, then with the integrity and the honesty, it's a new day. And what is happening in Ferguson, what is happening in Staten Island, what is happening in Baltimore, what is happening in Charleston is that people who have been afraid for so long, been sleepwalking for so long. And I don't need to remind my you brothers and sisters of the great Henry David Thoreau. When he went off to Walden Pond, what did he say? I want to do something to wake up my neighbors from their sleepwalking. Just like Gamble and Huff with the song sung by the musicians. What are the conditions under which folk straighten their backs up, no longer afraid? What are you doing, Martin? Martin says what? Cowardice is more evil than violence, and I'm a pacifist. Think about that. Gandhi said the same thing in his essay on the swords. Cowardice is more evil than violence, and I'm an absolute pacifist, Gandhi says. The fear, the sense of being intimidated. And of course, the history of black folk is precisely that, to try to niggerize all black people, to make sure that we so fearful and are scared and intimidated that we defer to the powers that be. And then we believe we're less beautiful and less intelligent and less moral. And when you shatter that white supremacist lie, same is true with the male supremacist lie. All sisters of all colors, you know that man sitting next to you has a brain that works much better than yours. What a lie. Get away from that intimidation. Get away from that fear. That brother got the same potential and possibility relative to his capacity that you do. Don't believe that lie. Shatter the fear. Shatter the sense of being afraid. Straighten up. But keep the love at the center of it. Honesty, third query. What does decency do in the face of insult? And these sound like pretty basic notions. Integrity, honesty, decency. I think we need a spiritual and moral awakening and renaissance around integrity, honesty, and decency. Cuts across color, sexual orientation, gender, nation. It's something that people are hungry for, given the fact that we're living in the most commodified, marketized, and commercialized culture in the history of the world. And the market has never been fundamentally about integrity. That's the tradition I'm talking about. That's the tradition Du Bois is talking about when he's talking about integrity, honesty, and decency. And the last query, and this is in some ways the most difficult one, because we don't like to talk about it. Du Bois says, how does virtue meet brute force? Because anybody who has the audacity to be fundamentally committed to integrity, honesty, and decency may sooner or later have to come to terms with brute force, with repression, with the FBI, with the CIA, and a variety of different forces that will try to silence you, that will try to make you so afraid, or to make you a sellout, to sell your soul for a mess of pottage because they think that the new wave of young folk might begin to be a serious challenge to the status quo. And that's where the issue of spirituality plays a role. And again, in many ways, I fall back on my own tradition. Death, where is thy sting? Grave, where is thy victory? There must be those who are willing to look the brute force in the face. Oscar Lopez Rivera in jail. Mumi Abu-Jamal in jail. Sundiata in jail. Sada Shakur in Cuba. looked the brute force in the face, had to come to terms with the killing of Medgar and Malcolm and Martin, had to come to terms with the vicious murders of Bobby Hutton in Oakland and Fred Hampton in Chicago. Yes, that is the cost oftentimes. So what, in the language of Miles Davis? So what? Is that all you got to offer, powers that be? We have a love so deep. We have a commitment to justice. Since justice is what love looks like in public, just like tenderness is what love feels like in private. We've got a commitment to a cause. Some of us call it the beloved community. Some of us call it radical democracy. Some of us call it the best of America. Some of us call it the best of the world house. Whatever your language is, just make sure you put that integrity, honesty, decency, and virtue at the center of it, and you are spiritually and morally prepared to be able to go hand in hand with the new waves that are trying to transform an America that is so now diseased by increasing wealth inequality, so diseased by vicious legacies of white supremacy and male supremacy, and even given the Supreme Court, let us remind our precious gay brothers and lesbian sisters and bisexuals and transgender, homophobia is still very much alive, even after the marriage. Even after the marriage. Which means the struggle goes on. Which means in the end, and I'll close on a blue note, in the end, if we're serious about that fourfold quest, if we're serious about the analysis from ecological catastrophe all the way across the moral and spiritual and political and economic catastrophes, that we're going to have to choose to be a blues people. Which means that America either learns something from the blues people in your midst, or you're going to lose your democracy. Because terrorism and trauma and stigma is not new for some of us. Catastrophe is not new. There has never been a Negro problem in America. There has been catastrophes visited on black people. Don't reduce the catastrophic to the problematic. There's never been a woman's problem. Catastrophe has been visited on women. There's never been an indigenous people's problem. Catastrophes visited on indigenous peoples. There's never been a gay problem and a lesbian problem. Catastrophes have been visited on gays and lesbians. There's never been a disability problem. Catastrophe visited on. That's the blues perspective. That's the blues perspective. And we just lost the king of the blues, B.B. King, and what did he say? Nobody loves me but my mama, and she might be jiving too. That's the blues. But B.B. King says, in the face of the blues, I'm still aspiring to integrity, honesty, decency, and virtue, with a little help from Lucille, with a style and a smile that is unreplaceable and irreversible. America, do we have what it takes? Always an open question. It could be we're just experiencing the decline of an empire that goes the same way of Rome. Depends on what we do. But one thing that puts a smile on my face is that when I come and see my brothers and sisters from UU and feel the authenticity of your spirit. I know you're not saviors or messiahs, but I have a feeling deep inside of me, going all the way down to the bowels of my existence, that we have got folk in this room who are willing to go down swinging like Ella Fitzgerald and Muhammad Ali.